don't change the physical style. We just use the color, change the color. Maybe this beauty is changed very, very lovely. So anyway, and for this creativity, public creativity, we can just like this. We can share the private space. We can provide everyone's creativity into the public, just like this. So the last one, I want to show this case. What is creativity from the first level into the last level? For example, the tea, just the natural material, and we call this is a hard innovation. We different some kinds of tea, and we can drink tea use a different cup, and we hope everyone want to use the beautiful cup to have a tea, but we can more and more add the cultural value into the just taking tea, just like the Japanese teas. And this is the highest. It's a philosophy of tea. So we can change the very beautiful purity of the environment and the creative space to have a tea. So we just show this from the material of the tea into the creativity space. We just translate from the natural resource into a creativity production. Maybe just a Starbucks concept store in Amsterdam. You maybe some friend visit this. It's a coffee theater. It's not a coffee bar. It's a coffee theater. So it's a show the experience space. So it's my conclusion. I think how to use the creativity into this sustainable development is very important. I call it creative entrepreneurship. What is entrepreneurship? It's a soft innovation plus hard innovation. The soft innovation is a focus on the cultural value and aesthetics changing. And the hard innovation is a focus on the function technology. Excellent. But we just plus, we call it creative entrepreneurship. Entrepreneur is very, very interesting, means just 1 minute, thank you. And it's I said Chris Bearton's books. According to the complete Oxford dictionary, entrepreneur was the first to denote a director or manager of a public music institution. So this is use cultural resource into the need of a market. So this is entrepreneur is a national meanings. Now the entrepreneur is a business terms. And the creative entrepreneur. This is a creative economics report. Creative entrepreneur is also gaining ground to characterize successful and talents, entrepreneurial people who are able to transform ideas into creative products or services for society, and the creativity entrepreneurship. So, how to train personal creativity entrepreneurship for the university, for the school? I think maybe UNESCO or maybe some university can post this degree, master degree. I call it MCA, Master of Creative Administration, is a training personal creativity entrepreneurship. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, Yong, thank you very, very much. I'm sorry that we had to rush you there a little bit. I know that you have a flight to catch, so you probably need to go yourself now. But we have about 1.5 hours left for the rest of the panel. So if I can maybe just ask them to come and take their positions and by the names. Yeah, and I think the presentation that we just had also reflects the degree to which we need to be engaging a little bit more around these kinds of things. And maybe this particular session was the beginning of people from China engaging with people from elsewhere around some of the concepts, some of the strategies that we all think we assume and understand to be the same. So thank you very much for being here. Maybe just to start off, by way of introduction, so that you know where I'm coming from in terms of asking some of these questions. I work at something called African Arts Institute based in Cape Town, and we provide secretariat services to Octonial Network, which is a pan-African network, a civil society network of artists, cultural activists, creative NGOs, and so on, engaged in the African creative sector, but also in its contribution to human rights, democracy, development, and the like. And one of the primary experiences that we've encountered is that national governments are not particularly keen on supporting the creative sector. So one of the reasons why we've gathered in the way that we have is in order to build partnerships across the continent among civil society, at least for us to see how we can partner with each other in bringing about a different, I suppose, set of conditions, set of circumstances for creative practitioners on the continent. And then also to link up with international partners in doing so. So the questions I'm going to ask are very much, I suppose, informed by the African conditions in which we work. And I'll introduce the panelists as we kind of go along. You've seen the background paper that was prepared for this particular session. You've also seen the panelists and read their brief bios as well. So we're not going to spend too much time doing that. But I'd like to maybe start with Raj. Raj is one of the foremost thinkers and writers around the African creative economy. He's been part of many conferences and publications and reports on the subject. This morning, Raj, David Crosby, another key thinker in this area, spoke about the development of thinking among development thinkers. From the 60s and 70s, where the concentration was very much on the growth of the economy in order to create the resources to basically drive development. And how that has shifted in the 80s and 90s to a great understanding of the role of culture in development as well. You've been very much part of formulating those reports. Till the late 90s, in this particular century, there is now been this concentration on the creative industries as a key driver of development as well. So the first question is where we are now with regard to the creative industries not in fact exactly the same where we were in the 60s and 70s, in that we are concentrating on economic drivers, and the only difference is that we are saying that the creative industries are another kind of economic driver in the same way as oil agriculture might have been at some stage. And then maybe linked to that particular question, if investment in creativity and the creative industries is about economic growth in order to drive development, one of the things that you would know from an African experience is that some of the African economies that have been really fast-growing economies over the last 10 years, still actually, those societies still have a lot of the poorest people. So it's not as if we've had a problem with economic growth, it's been really a problem with distribution of the wealth that is going to be generated. In that particular context, how would you apply creativity in order for the masses to benefit?
Okay, well, two difficult questions, Mike. Before I even try and reply, good afternoon, everybody. And may I start by congratulating you for an innovation that I think is creative. Because one of the most uncreative forms of spending time, an outmoded technology, is this kind of conference. And it's high time that everybody who organizes conferences gets that into their heads, that there is a much better way of actually getting people to share ideas and communicate. That said, the first question is whether the discourse, the instrumental discourse around the cultural and creative industries is similar to that of the 60s and 70s. I'd say no, not at all, for the simple reason that what we call today the cultural and creative industries was, at that time, completely conceived, as it still is in the United States, within the framework of the entertainment industry. It was business, and you didn't really pose the question in those terms. And in the welfare state dispensation of the 60s and 70s in Europe, where the cultural policy discourse was elaborated, it seemed to be self-evident that what we're talking about is how governments and public policy could help. Although already in the late 60s, you had people like Augustin Girard, who were putting their finger on the fact that, guys, a hell of a lot of the culture that surrounds us, the cultural stratosphere in which we're all going to move, is going to be provided by the marketplace. So there were inklings of this, but I think behind your question is whether we're not at a point that we were long ago. And I'm perhaps a little young, not quite as young as I look, but in 1980 I was one of the people who actually contributed to the drafting of the Mexico City Declaration. And there's at least one person in the room who was there as well. And I wonder if I could just read out the first paragraph from the cultural dimension of development paragraph of the Mexico Declaration, which says, culture, this is in 1980, August. Culture constitutes a fundamental dimension of the development process and helps to strengthen the independence, sovereignty, and identity of nations. So that's in a different framework. That's the language of the period. To continue. Growth has frequently been conceived in quantitative terms without taking into account its necessary qualitative dimension, namely the satisfaction of man's, it was before gender awareness, man's spiritual and cultural aspirations. The aim of genuine development is the continuing well-being and fulfillment of each and every individual. I won't go on, but the point I'm making is that the language and the ideas are exactly the same. Why have we not progressed in 33 years, beyond that point? I put the question, I have some ideas of what the answer would be, but I won't share them with you now. The second point that, the second question that you asked is I think has to be very central in our thinking about the creative economy or the cultural and creative industries, as others prefer to call it in China, for example. The official term is now the cultural and creative industries. I, for my part, always prefer a broader category, which is the cultural economy. However you describe it, I think one of the big issues is that in all of the development-linked advocacy, and some of that is hype, about how wonderful the creative economy is for development, the equity and distributed elements are very rarely thought about. And it's quite clear, we have also a bit of a conundrum there, that the rise of the creative economy in a lot of the developing world is based on the emerging middle class. And I would never spit on the emerging middle class. Belonging to an old middle class, there's no reason I should prevent others from joining them. The point is that when you have a whole sector that's geared to the emerging middle class, as it is, what about the underclass?
Well, Raj, thank you very, very much for that. And it actually leads very well into the next question, which is to my fellow South African, Avril Joffe, who is a very accomplished consultant in this area of the creative economy and has worked quite extensively in capacity building around cultural entrepreneurship, around issues of cultural policy and the like. Avril, there's been a lot of concentration on the creative industries as a driver of development in the sense that it's also a job creator. We often talk about how that, in a way, the barriers to entry are quite limited, and in some ways, if we concentrated on developing the creative industries, we'll be able to have a whole number of people employed who are unemployed at the moment. And in our own country at the moment, the emphasis on the Zanzibar economy is around this. Now, the creative economy has kind of been part of our cultural policy since 1996 at least. At a time when our unemployment rate was at about 17%. Our unemployment rate, according to figures released last week, stands at about 25%, so quite a major increase since that time. And if we added, because as you know, unemployment is defined by the people without jobs and who are still looking for work. if we added in people who have given up looking for work, our employment rate would stand at about 35–36%. Now, since we as a country have embraced the creative industries from 17 years ago, why is it that we have not been able to basically provide employment? Why has unemployment gone up as opposed to down if one uses that as an example of how we can provide employment? And related to that, because it links up with Roger's question about the middle class, is employment in the creative industries not in fact something that is peculiarly the middle class phenomenon? That the people to be employed in it are educated, relatively resourced, whereas in fact the people who need employment are on the underside of history, they are unskilled and so on.
Okay, wow. Hello everybody. Focus on. Hello? Testing, testing. Hello. Thank you for that question. Mike. I'll get you later. In the work that we were doing in 1996, the question really wasn't as much about employment in those days. It was much more about making a case to the Department of Trade and Industry to actually take the creative sector seriously and understand it as not only a nice to have and a drain on the fiscus, but to see it really as a potential income generator, export earner, and so on. And so really the point of looking at the 4 cases that we did at the time, which was music, publishing, film and craft, was to really say to what extent are these parts of what we call culture and the cultural sector, can we see them in the same way that we really understand industry? And it was really the first attempt to understand in South Africa what are the cultural industries. In those days we didn't have the words creative industries or creative economy, we were still at cultural industry. So we're very much around the cultural types of work around music and so on. And what we identified is that really those industries wouldn't exist without the artists. That it was the artist at the heart of that industry. Without the musician, there is no live music. Without the designer and the person who comes and conceives the idea of craft, there is no craft sector. And what we noticed is that not only do these